Biden has appointed so many great judges, which stands in stark contrast to these horrible judges that were appointed by Trump. And I mean horrible judges, and leading the way on those horrible judges is this judge in Texas. And we've talked about him before here on the MeidasTouch Network, Judge Mark Pittman. And Judge Mark Pittman is a Trump appointee. I think he was appointed in 2019. And in this case, Myra Brown versus the U.S. Department of Education, he basically ruled that the student debt cancellation program is unconstitutional and has blocked the program permanently blocked. One judge, a nationwide order blocking the student debt cancellation program. Now, this just happened. This just broke before we started the MeidasTouch podcast and we went live. And so I read the 26-page order very quickly here.
Look at this guy, or quick reader. Huh?
Big reader over here.
Big quick reader over here.
So the Biden administration,
I do want to give you credit, Ben, because people don't know this, and I'm sorry you're frustrated that I'm interrupting you, but you actually read these orders. And sometimes they're 26 pages, sometimes they're longer, and I just got to give you credit for actually doing the work. All right, back to you.
Yeah, and by the way, the order came out 45 minutes before the show came out. It was a 26-page. So I had to digest the order. And look, the reality is that when you read all of the cases every day, the arguments that are being made by the Republicans, it's not a both sides issue, by the MAGA extremists and by the Federalist Society lawyers, they're the same arguments. So I can know right away when I read it, okay, I see what they're arguing. But what they did when Biden announced his student debt cancellation program is they flooded the zone and filed lawsuits everywhere. So you may be saying, well, I thought I heard about that case in Wisconsin, and didn't that go to the Supreme Court? And didn't Judge Amy Coney Barrett deny the relief and that the program stayed in effect? No, that's that case. What about the case before the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals that the state of Nebraska filed, where the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals stayed or temporarily blocked the debt cancellation program? Well, that's another case that these MAGA Republican Federalist Society lawyers file, and they try to find the Federalist Society judge to basically not acknowledge the law and just, like a Judge Eileen Cannon or here a Judge Pittman, and to basically rule whatever the Federalist Society lawyer MAGA extremist position is. They flooded the zone. They had taxpayers bring lawsuits and states bring lawsuits. But get this, when I read this case, the MAGA extremists had, they basically have these proxies. They find people to file these lawsuits, but this is who they had file this lawsuit in Texas. A plaintiff, Myra Brown and Alexander Taylor, who were identified as students who have student loans. And how Brown says that Brown is injured. Brown is ineligible for any debt forgiveness under the student cancellation program because her loans are commercially held. And Taylor is ineligible for the full $20,000 in debt forgiveness under the program because he did not receive a Pell Grant. So they found a student to sue because he's getting $10,000 in debt relief and wanted $20,000 in debt relief. That's their base. No one's talking about this right now.
They're pitting students against other students.
They had students sue students, and one student who had commercially granted loans. So they're like, I'm not being helped by the program. But that's like me suing for when the banks get bailouts, right? Well, I didn't get the bailout. Why is that a different version of standing than us suing, saying, well, you didn't give me that benefit? Think about how insane that is. That's what the judge is saying, that their injury is that they did not get a benefit that other people got, that everyone in the world should get the benefit. Well, under that theory, I want to get the $1 billion bailouts that the banks get. I want to get all of the tax incentives that the billionaires get when the MAGA Republicans and Republicans take control. And then I could have standing to sue. Like, that's what the issue is here. How insane is that? And so they sue. And then what the court says is under the HEROES Act, that it would be unconstitutional for Biden to invoke the HEROES Act, which was passed in 2003 as the enabling statute that lets him grant the student debt cancellation program. And let me just read for you, if I could pull it up, what the HEROES Act says. And so it says, the HEROES Act grants the Secretary of Education the authority to waive or modify any statutory or regulatory provision applicable to the student financial assistance programs that the secretary deems necessary in connection with a war or other military operations or national emergency. And so here the court's ruling was that it was unconstitutional to give student debt cancellation because it wasn't in connection with a war or other military operations. But the judge just ignored the last words, or national emergency. Hello, the pandemic was a national emergency. By the way, a national emergency also invoked by the Trump administration. And so that is how the ruling is based. They're saying that that only impacts war. How do I know it? That's what it says. Look, it says in the first sentence of the order, the Constitution vests all legislative powers in Congress. The power, however, can be delegated to the executive branch. But if the executive branch seeks to use that delegated power to create a law of vast economic and political significance, it must have clear congressional authorization. If not, the executive branch unconstitutionally exercises legislative powers vested in Congress. In this case, the HEROES Act, a law to provide loan assistance to military personnel defending our nation, does not provide the executive branch clear congressional authorization to create a $400 billion student loan forgiveness program. Thus, the program is an unconstitutional exercise of Congress's legislative power and must be vacated. They just ignore what the statute says.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I can't imagine why Gen Z voters voted against the Republican Party in droves here and voted for the party who was actually trying to get them student loan relief. I mean, the whole thing is just so I mean, it's so insane. So what happens from here, I guess, is the natural question. Like, is this game over? It goes to a higher court. This is a lower court.
It goes to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a very MAGA extremist-filled court. And so we'll see what the Fifth Circuit does, but like, obviously there's going to be an immediate appeal. The Biden administration is going to ask the Fifth Circuit to stay or stop the order. They're going to argue there's a probability of success on the merits, because how could you find standing? How could you find their standing in these circumstances, right? Where the people are saying their injury was that they got $10,000, but others are getting $20,000, or that they didn't get the relief, that caused them an injury. It didn't cause them an injury. It's the status quo. Yes, others may have got the benefit, like a Pell Grant, but you weren't caused an injury.
Harm, yeah.
If the standing requirement for harm was that I wasn't given the benefits, just think about how warped, and like, for all the people are like, well,
should I sue the Powerball because I didn't win the Powerball? Like, is this the natural?
Point.
I'm going to sue the Power Bill. I didn't win the Powerball, so I feel injured and give me my money, please. Suing. I mean,
I read this 26-page order, Brett, and I was like, on what grounds? And then I saw that it was students. And I didn't know that until I read it, because I just hadn't been following that one. I've been all focused on election coverage, and I've been focused on what the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals was doing with the state of Nebraska's lawsuit, where the state of Nebraska said their injury is they're losing tax revenue because they want to tax the debt relief as income in the future. That's their basis of standing. More taxes, right? I mean, it's just a warped view. There's no ideological view of these people other than cruelty.
It's
for cruelty's sake.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.